Hello everyone and welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan and today we're going to talk about the Tomb Kings. You see, recently I spoke about them in a Characters That Need a Rework video. This is where I lightly brushed upon the Tomb Kings as I spoke about etc. And I've been really thinking about the Tomb Kings a lot. This weekend I've been painting up a bunch of Tomb King warriors and it made me want to play a Tomb Kings campaign. But in this video I want to talk about two things. One, they could still very much use another DLC, and two, stuff that could fix them up. Not a full rework, like for example what happened to the dwarfs, but more so in line of what happened to Nurgle, a small rework that just kind of fixes up some problems and makes them more fun. Now I do have to say that the Rise of the Tomb Kings DLC is still one of the best that Creative Assembly have ever released, so I'm not asking for a complete overhaul because of that. It's incredibly solid, and if you haven't played Tomb Kings yet, you definitely should. But without further ado, let's begin. So first up we'll talk about DLC possibilities, because yes, there is a possibility to get a DLC with the Tomb Kings. There's still some stuff missing, and it doesn't have to look towards Warhammer the Old World, which is quite important, as that's apparently separate IP, despite it being the same timeline and, you know, Games Workshop being Games Workshop. But yeah, as it stands, the roster for the Tomb Kings isn't too bad. Sure, there's a few things that could kind of pad things out, but if you just have the Rise of the Tomb Kings right now, you should be in a pretty good spot. However, there's a few things which could actually add more to it. So one thing that's really baffling that's still not in-game is the High Lich Priest, also known as the Hierophant. This is something which is quite important because in the lore, all the Tomb King armies were actually led by a Hierophant. This was also the case in the tabletop too. If your Hierophant should die, well, yeah, your army would start crumbling. Recently had that in a game of Warhammer the Old World too. So it's kind of strange that we don't have a spellcaster generic lord to lead some armies. Now I'm not saying that you have to force that so they're only spellcasters. I quite like having Tomb Kings leading armies too, but the variety is quite important, especially as, again, we do need, if we want the rosters to be as similar as the 8th edition counterpart, which is something that Creative Assembly have said many times. So yeah, a Lord option with the Lore of Light, Death, Nehekara and Shadows. And while they're at it, you know, they could actually give some mount options to spellcasters, as right now the normal Lich Priest can only mount on a skeleton steed. It would be nice to get a chariot or even one of the battle kitties to mount upon. The next thing that we're missing is a Herald. So a Herald is very much like a Tomb Prince as it focuses on melee combat, but also should buff up your armies. I think a big problem with the Tomb Kings is, since their tech tree is so slow to get benefits, you do start lacking very early on. So having a Herald also provide some minor buffs could be beneficial there, just to make it a little bit easier. I know some people have been frustrated with the Tomb Kings because you end up with, waiting 16 turns to get another army because they're free, and sometimes, especially if you're playing in harder difficulties, the AI starts dogpiling on you, so you start suffering. Again, a buffer would help out here tremendously. So this is a unit variant, which is a shame that we still don't have them. The Upshepti with great weapons. Now you might be saying, well, we already have Upshepti with bows, and we already have them with additional hand weapons. Why the great weapon one? And simply put, well, great weapon units are pretty decent. The fact is that this is an iconic miniature, which is still being sold to this day, and I still don't think it's worth the price that Games Workshop have set upon it for that, but, you know, those are Games Workshop prices. Yeah, it's weird that we just don't have the Great Weapon one. They're the ones that are most well known, and still nothing. So with these lads, you can have a lot more armor-piercing damage than the other ones, and, well, you know, it would just be kind of cool. Think of the splash damage that this could do. The Tomb Kings are also missing out on great weapons, so it kind of just fills a little bit of a hole there. Again, variety is important, and people do want all the variants that you could get on the tabletop. Tomb Swarms is something that people have been asking for, and technically they are represented in the game. There is an ability which gives you that, but it's not really a unit. And recently, the Tomb Swarms had a major visual update when it came to Warhammer the Old World. Now keep this in mind, because I know you guys are going to be saying, no Warhammer the Old World, but this isn't a new unit. This is actually a update. It's the same reason why we have certain demons from Warhammer Fantasy, but instead looking like the ones from Age of Sigmar and 40k. It's just a visual update to make them look a little bit more, you know, standardized. And I wouldn't really be opposed to this. We could have a swarm unit, which is literally just a tar pit. It could be a kinda Mortis engine style unit. no healing involved, but rather it moves around and does damage to the enemies around them. I think it could work. At the end of the day, it looks amazing. I actually recently finally bought a pack myself when I was at Warhammer World earlier this year, and yeah, I can't stop looking at them. They look really, really cool compared to the old garbage that we had. It does turn out, by the way, that there is no such thing as a swarm tech. This is something that we talked about a while back, as apparently a member of Creative Assembly staff misspoke. However, swarms are doable. We've seen them with Nurglings. This would be much smaller and kind of detailed, but swarm units were very, very popular back in the day, mostly because they were tar pits, and it would be nice to see that happen once again. We've got some other missing swarm units for other factions. It would be cool to see those eventually implemented too. Add in the Khemric Titan, which is supposed to be, you know, the big monster and the big seller, which is a monster that was introduced during the supplementary period of 8th edition, and never had a model, unfortunately, but it did have rules and it did have art. Again, the model that you're seeing is created by someone else. It's a fan-made model. But essentially, it's supposed to be a very powerful, large creature that can also heal itself. It's a horde killer. It's supposed to be a monster killer too. Incredibly fast too. We talked about this a while back. Yeah, I mean, big centerpieces like this, they're not always needed, and it's something that's been discussed with the fan base and also Creative Assembly, I've heard, but the Tomb Kings have no big centerpiece monster. I know some people would like the Tomb King Dragon, but unfortunately that's just never going to happen. Unless Games Workshop outright go, yeah, no, they were the same IP all along, woo! This next one is technically not a Tomb King unit, but also kinda yes. You see, before the Undead was split up into Vampire Counts and Tomb Kings, we just had the Undead. It was just a generic faction. So this is the Bolt Thrower, also known as the Bone Thrower. And yeah, it's just a Bone Thrower. Right? It's nothing too special, however, it would provide a more accurate type of artillery for the Tomb Kings, something that we know that they did actually use in lore. The model does exist, we just need to have to be changed around a little bit because this is from like, God, what, 4th edition? And then obviously there was a War Master variant. But it would make sense with the Tomb Kings, as it sure as hell does not make sense with the Vampire Counts. You might be saying that the Bone Giant technically does that already, considering that it is a ranged version, and yeah, it is its own bolt thrower, but it's also quite good at melee. This would give you a multiple unit bolt thrower to get some shots out. Again, having the option rather than not having it is always best. Now, I'm not sure what they could do for a 5th or 6th unit, mostly because the Tomb Kings are actually almost done. Some of you might be saying the mummies, but I feel like those have been written out of the lore, or the Bestefi also, which are supposed to be cats. They're supposed to be normal-sized cats, but if they turn them into something around the size of the Kislev Battle Kitties, that could work very much too. They never had models, but remember that recently with the Ogre announcement for the next DLC, Blood Vultures never had a model, and that also kind of justifies going into deeper lore and bringing some stuff out. There doesn't have to be 6 units when it comes to a new DLC, it could just be 5, especially if these DLCs end up coming alongside other factions too. The most important thing is having in the additions that people are requesting, and I feel like those things are what people have been wanting when it comes to some Tomb King content. The cat would be cool, mostly because Kitty. When it comes to legendary characters, I've got my mindset on 2 things. For a legendary lord, Ramotep the Visionary, who never had his own model, but yes, did have some art, I believe, and yeah, he's a Necrotect, but this could be very different because it could be a Lord version of the Necrotect, just him, buffing heavily for construct units in his army, and could have something very similar to that of Ikit's Workshop, which, yes, I know has been used a number of times now, especially with the introduction of Elspeth, but at the end of the day, it kind of works. You could get some special Regiment of Renown constructs, Royal, Upshati, and stuff like that, which again is taken from the whole old world scenario, but it's literally the same model, right? You get it and you paint it different colors, that's the only difference. Again, proving that sometimes reusing the mechanics, making them a little bit different, because if you do compare Ikit's Workshop to that of Elspeth's one, it's very different, even though it's still very much the same, if you get what I mean, and it could be done here too. Legendary Hero, there's only one character that I want, and I think a lot of people will echo the sentiment. Yeah, Prince Apophis. He is an assassin, he's really, really cool, unique model, unique style, unique lore. This guy would be your ultimate hero killer. He would be there just to do damage to big monsters too. I mean, he is so special, I really doubt that Creative Assembly would look towards the Tomb Kings and not add him in, especially since in the end times he does show up a fair amount too. My only concern about the Tomb Kings, even if we don't get another DLC, is I really hope they don't end up without a legendary hero. Honestly, I would love to see every faction have some sort of legendary hero, because it does buff up your army quite a bit. You can have a secondary army feeling like it's being run by a legendary lord, essentially in terms of power. With regards to Ramatep, they could literally put him anywhere, just find another location where there was a secret pyramid, just like it was with Katep, and there you go. It just makes things a lot more fun to have some variety. Alright, now we're going to talk about the Tomb King rework, and you're going to notice that a lot of things are going to stay very much the same because, yeah, the system works. There's not that many big changes that I would see towards them, and that's a good thing because it shows the level of outstanding quality that this DLC has, where most of us, when we look at to future DLCs, the possibility of a DLC for this faction, that faction, race packs or whatever, we always look towards the Tomb Kings as the prime example. So one thing I'd like to see is changing how pyramids work. So pyramids are a very special building for the Tomb Kings, which gives you some bonuses to certain things, but also increases unit capacity. What I would love to see is, instead of increasing unit capacity by a flat number, whereas in the Great Pyramid, etc., it's +2 for Tomb God Halberds, Skeletal Chariots, and Skeletal Archer Chariots, I'd like to see it having a chance per turn to increase the capacity just flat for you, right? So every few turns, you could get an increased permanent capacity for Tomb Guards, Tomb Chariots, and any other units. Same thing with the other pyramids being specialized, they should also have that. The reason why I'm saying this is because, well, the pyramids are supposed to be special, right? They need to be as lucrative as possible, especially since the way to get your armies increasing with better units is by taking other locations and building up buildings, which can be quite expensive. The Tomb Kings don't really have that much money generation. So I'm not saying that this is going to snowball, it should just be a percentage chance, but it's better than just a flat increase of +2 and that's it. How many times have you played the Tomb Kings and you've ended up with just armies of Skeletal Warriors, Skeletal Warriors, Skeletal Warriors, and more Skeletal Warriors? It does get kind of boring in late game, and that's a big frustration that I've seen from the player base. When it comes to the tech tree, ultimately I do think it's fine, but what they need to do is have a few more options, mostly because it takes such a long time to get your research rate up and going, especially as when you get your first dynasty unlocked, it reduces your research rate. It does feel quite punishing. So really, I would say, you see how the dynasties have on the right-hand side, focusing on units and capacity, while the left-hand side should focus on some economy and infrastructure-based stuff. Which, yes, I am fully aware that the proclamations at the bottom do also provide that, but the problem is they're very expensive, right? 5,000 is very, very expensive. You're not going to be getting that early on into your campaign. You're not going to be getting that until later on because you're building up all your unit capacity stuff to get the actual units which are going to help you win the campaign. So what I would say is at the bottom, rather than having a proclamation, you could get pseudo-legendary heroes just to have some stronger version of hero characters where they'd be the same as every other, just with a better trait. Same thing as the dynasty pseudo-legendary lords at the top. I think something that would actually work out quite well, as yeah, it would bring a little bit more balance towards the Tomb King faction. I've played the Tomb Kings a fair amount, I like them, and really I don't want to change too much about them if it was up to me. It's more a little change here and there would be absolutely fantastic. Building wise, the Tomb Kings are fine, although I will say that the advanced military section looks incredibly anemic, mostly because it's just like one building and that's it. I'm not sure if they had plans to do more Tomb King DLCs and then it got ultimately scrapped, or just maybe that's the best they could come up with. The only issue I do have with the Tomb Kings is that there should be an extra building to increase research rate. You can get that with the main settlement buildings, and even then it's still not great because the only way that you can increase research rate is basically being as aggressive as possible. There should be a generic building that also buffs this up so it doesn't make your campaign too much of a slog. Again, not really complaining too much, but it does get a little slow, especially when you've played the Tomb Kings over and over again, which is something that you do want, right? At the end of the day, replayability is the biggest thing with Warhammer 3. When it comes to the characters themselves, well, Cetra we've already talked about in a previous video, but I'll mention it here again. He should be able to confederate everyone, and he should be the only Tomb King to be able to do so, very similar to how we've got with Archaon and Be'lakor being able to confederate other Warriors of Chaos factions, and this is mainly because he is the King of Kings. He is the one who controls the other Tomb King factions, because yeah, he's the Bone Daddy, right? Everyone bows to him eventually, or else he completely destroys you and your dynasty. There should also be some incentivization for him to vassal other Tomb King factions, as it just makes sense for his character to be able to vassalize other Tomb Kings and have them serving him, providing great bonuses. In a sense, very similar to how Alariel has the unity of Ulthuan, this would be how much you control of Nekara, which means that the more you control, the more bonuses you get. You don't have to outright control them, you could have some other minor Tomb King factions, have that be essentially your doorstop, protecting yourself as you push into the Badlands and so on, but it'd be kind of cool because again, all would have to serve the King of Kings. It wouldn't be a stylized new mechanic, but instead in the same vein as that of Epidemius, which I think many people did enjoy. When it comes to Archon the Black, I would say leave him out of any updates. I know that sounds really odd, but the idea is if we do end up getting Nagash, which I very much think that we'll get Nagash in the future, he could possibly get moved into Nagash's faction, if that's actually possible with the tech, but considering that CA Sophia have managed to even move the map away from 0-0, I think that that's entirely possible. So whatever happens to Nagash in terms of faction mechanics and so on, something around that line would happen to Archon, because Archon would be Nagash's big servant, right? So he'd be tied directly to that, and I don't imagine Nagash would be a generic Tomb King faction. In a perfect world, he'd have access to Tomb Kings, Vampire Counts, and Vampire Coast, and Archon could obviously have the Tomb Kings, but a stripped down roster of the Vampire Coast and the Vampire Counts too. Just a little bit more than what they already have, because that's still very small. Khalida could get something focusing around hunting down vampire factions, getting some faction-wide bonuses as she destroys vampire count factions. Makes sense with her lore. This, I imagine, if we do get a Tomb King DLC or a Tomb King update in general, could be after the introduction of Neferata, as I don't imagine that Neferata would be omitted from this franchise. So you could destroy a bunch of vampire count factions, and when you've destroyed a certain amount, or a certain amount have been destroyed in general across the world so it doesn't softlock you, then you could get a quest battle to fight Neferata. So when she gets added in, they could record some voice lines for Neferata and have that there in the future for an update. This is something that actually does happen, by the way. Creative Assembly do record loads of voice lines that aren't seen with a specific DLC, and they're just there for a just-in-case moment down the line. And then finally, Katet. Delete him. Nah, I'm kidding. I know some people actually do like him, I just don't like him because he's a character with very little lore that they introduced, rather than someone like Ramotep, who is very well known. I don't know, there's something that could be done with him. At the end of the day, he's been sent off to go and find the cure for undeath and bring the golden age that was promised, etc. He just doesn't have anything of that feeling in this campaign. Maybe picking up some stuff, picking up some icons, some books, some magical items, and then, you know, giving him some faction-wide bonuses would be kind of cool. Again, in the similar vein of that of Epidemius, something small. The Tomb Kings already had their race-wide mechanic, which is pretty cool, but at the end of the day, there needs to be something to kind of separate the factions, give you a reason to play as Khalida, give you a reason to play as Archon, give you a reason to play as Cetra, and obviously Kateb too. Little reworks like that end up really showcasing how a faction could be done in such a unique way, which is why some people are so very happy with how the Nurgle faction's playing right now, and also with the Empire too. These are just some basic ideas. I've been thinking about the Tomb Kings a fair amount today. It's mostly just, you know, they're a cool faction. I'd love to see them brought up to the final level of Warhammer 3, and that way we don't need to see anything more for them, get them fully done, and yeah, you know, look towards the other stuff. I don't think they need a DLC, although it would be really nice to see a DLC. Ultimately, what I would love to see more than anything is an update, but yeah, a DLC would be great. At the end of the day, everyone wants their factions to have everything, and it would just be kind of cool to be done with them. Maybe Creative Assembly have similar ideas, maybe they've got better ideas, and maybe you guys have better ideas. So if you do, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Let's have a bit of a discussion. Yeah, I mean, I'm hyped up. The fact is, I would sooner see a update than a DLC for the Tomb Kings. I know some people would say the Morghast and stuff like that, but I imagine that the Morghast would come around a Nagash-focused DLC. I'm just excited that Creative Assembly have been thinking about, updating different factions in the 0.1 and possibly 0.2 patches, which is making me think about the Tomb Kings. It's making me think about everything here. Hey, here's hoping for good times. We still have to wait a decent amount of time till we hear more about the next DLC, so we might as well talk about some fun stuff, right? With all that being said, guys, have a great day. I should be streaming live again today. I'm just trying to get everything sorted. This video is likely going to come out late, but yeah, there's only so much that I can do. Have a great day, guys. I'll see you all again very, very soon.